Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you again, Dr. Paul.
Good. I want to talk about counterfeiting, and most people know about counterfeiting of the money, but I want to talk about the counterfeiting of the money and the counterfeiting that exists throughout our society, and actually it's worldwide too when you think of all the fake news going on, and that's what we live with. I was thinking the other day when one of our esteemed leaders was giving a report, I think he worked for the State Department or something, and I got to thinking, I can't remember of him ever addressing the nation in a press conference where I didn't think he told a lie or many lies. There's just zero confidence. And that to me, I mean, the whole thing is the system is counterfeit, the money's counterfeit, the economy is counterfeit. But everybody's feeling pretty good right now. Of course, the markets statistics are showing that things are booming in this country. And this, of course, has some drawbacks because it's really starting off with the counterfeiting that we've lived with for a long, long time, and that's the counterfeiting money and the monopoly control of fiat money. But I want to start by mentioning what the founders thought of this, because they were very concerned about counterfeit money and fiat money because they had gone through the destruction of the continental dollar, so they didn't want the counterfeit money to come back up again. So very early on, as early as 1790, they had a bill called the Crimes Act. And it was the first Congress to meet, and they started talking about some of the federal laws that they had to have. They said that we don't want a lot of federal laws, but money was important. And it was listed in that bill, as a major crime. But then a couple years later, our government had to be more specific about the currency and define the currency. And it's a major piece of legislation that was the Coinage Act of 1792. And they concentrated on definitions and penalty for things like treason and piracy, and not a whole lot listed in the Constitution. But they talked about counterfeiting money. They talked about fiat money and debasing the currency. Now I want to read one little phrase that comes out of this, because they were very, very concerned about it. And just remember, they also were the ones that wrote the bill, wrote the Eighth Amendment, and said there should be no unusual and vicious penalty. So, but here's what they think should happen to somebody who debased the currency. A person who commit any or either of the said offenses shall be deemed guilty of felony and shall suffer death. Well, that's pretty extreme for all of us now. I mean, it's a mess, but I think they understood the seriousness. That's obviously the point I'm making is counterfeiting and lying, especially in the money area, is a very serious matter, even though the counterfeiter can get away with it for a long time. And it took a long time for them, those individuals in charge, our central bank and our government, to convert a sound currency into one that's totally fiat. It's 100% counterfeit. And now I believe that we're suffering the potential calamity that comes from counterfeiting and lying to the people and pretending all is well. And every day now, especially with the hearings going on and the impeachment process, how many great leaders we have now, Republicans and especially the Democrats, we have to obey the Constitution. And when it comes to war and peace and money areas, they have no more concern about the Constitution. Maybe they don't have no comprehension, but they certainly brag that they're following the Constitution. Chris, for me, I'd like to see our nation once again wake up again, decide that maybe the founders had something to say about a limited society, and especially their very great concerns they had about counterfeiting the currency.
I wish that would be the case too, Dr. Paul. And you made some great points. And, we can't have a sound economy without sound money. So all the stuff that you hear on the news, it's pretty much fake. And the Fed is counterfeiting money. I think just yesterday morning, they created another $80 billion. And it's, all this money is working its way into the stock market. And the president has equated the stock market with the economy. The stock market's up, he's doing a great job, and the economy has never been better. But nothing could be, further from the truth. We have a situation where half of Americans are living or receiving federal money, meaning one half is supporting the other half. And then you have half of Americans that are making less than $33,000 per year. And, I ask our viewers, how many people do you know that are actually living in the black, that their assets are way more than their liabilities? I don't know that many. Most people are swimming in debt, just like the government itself. And then you have, 500,000 or whatever the number is, a huge number of homeless people. And this is with the biggest government that is. I mean, we were always told how government is there to help the poor. No, it's the exact opposite. The bigger they get, the more poor there are. So this is what we get with counterfeit money and a counterfeit economy.
In some ways, it always reminds me of what goes on in foreign policy, because our foreign policy is based on lies. We go to war based on lies and total ignoring of the Constitution. And that's what happens, with the financial system, too. And I was just thinking, the reports that are coming out today, they don't talk about what happened in September. In September, and we've mentioned this before, a major event occurred. All that inflation and expansion on the monetary base and the amount of money that the balance sheets had, they couldn't maintain it. They were trying to shrink it just a little bit. And they did that at the beginning of last year, and it was a horrible, horrible adjustment. They couldn't do it. So all of a sudden, the declaration was made by the Fed. Not too many people in this country knew about it. And they said, wait a minute, we can't even take one baby step toward a little bit more sensible monetary policy and maybe shrink the balance sheet a little bit. So they panicked, and they actually created trillions of dollars. The balance sheet has gone up $300 billion. But they really pumped it in, and they're continuing to do that. So it's just on a lark now, and people say, oh, it's okay. But what they don't realize is, and you mentioned it, Chris, is you can't say when the stock market goes up that is a sign of everything being okay. There's nothing counterfeit about it. And the whole point is, it's exactly the thing that we should be looking at and realizing, because the credit is being created endlessly. There's no attempt to protect against a runaway inflation, so they continue to do the same thing. And this is something that they realize now that they can't do it. But what happened in September was the repo market, where they had to buy back their loans, and then the interest rates are overnight rates, 1 to 2%. All of a sudden, they shot up to 10%, and the Fed had to come in with these billions and billions of dollars to tide it over and change their whole policy. And one of the reasons why the banks don't have enough money is always a shortage of money, especially when you have a lot of inflation. They were short money, but it has a lot to do with a $1 trillion national deficit each year, and it's supposed to go up and not be alleviated at any time in the future that they can conceive of. So that's where the money has to go. And I'm always fascinated with this idea that when the consumer looks at price inflation, they never say anything about the Fed and the government and the shortage of purchasing power. They always say, I don't have enough money. But they should say, I don't have enough purchasing power. Because actually, when you have sound money, the purchasing power of your currency goes up again, and there's not a shortage of money, and there's not a shortage of purchasing power. But now it's generally said that we just need more and more, and they are addicted to it. And it serves a purpose. The financial markets love it. The liberals like it for their welfare program. The military-industrial complex loves it. And this is where you really see the alliance, the coordination and the collusion of all the leaders in the Republican Democratic Party, because just a couple of weeks ago they passed the budget, and it had all these atrocities in it, and nobody hardly said a word about it. And so the whole system, the process is bankrupt, and it's counterfeit and a pretense because they don't even talk about what is wrong. And they believe that as long as the stocks are going up, we'll print more and more money, and that's what they're doing now. And I'm sure they are already, because we established the principle when we bought up the mortgage-backed securities. But they're talking about, and who knows when they'll do it because it'll be secret at first, they'll buy stocks directly in order to keep the stocks from going down. And this illusion, this counterfeit operation, the markets, the counterfeit there, but it is something that is lacking. And one is, the inability of our current crop of politicians and our universities teaching economics to tell the truth about what's happening, or to understand they don't have any understanding of what true free markets are all about, where you have to produce something, save something, invest something. Now, you don't have to do that. You just get the Fed. The Fed will take care of us. And there's this dependence on it, and it is a counterfeit. It's a counterfeit of philosophy. It's a counterfeit of personality and characters. And just think of all the lies they tell when they go to war, constantly going to war. And now today, the attack on all the countries that we dominate, and that's plenty, that it's always the other countries that have to be punished with sanctions, because we're going to punish those people, because if we punish enough kids, make them suffer, make them die, maybe their people will rise up and give us a government that'll be more friendly to the United States. So I would say that is a bankrupt system, and you can't get by counterfeiting thoughts and philosophy. That's what they're trying to do, but it will end. I am convinced of it.
That's true, Dr. Paul. And you mentioned fake news at the top of the show. And boy, did Americans for 3 straight years get a clinic on what fake news is, with the whole Russiagate thing for years, and then Ukrainegate. And then, Trump followers and the president himself were screaming from the hilltops, fake news, and they were right. And then after that, we had the Afghanistan papers. And forget 3 years. How about you were lied to for 18 years? And that's what the Afghanistan papers were telling us. And we just had this, scary situation with Iran. And, the same people that were crying fake news went to these outlets, found out what they're supposed to think, and then just started repeating it word for word. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing? You're just calling them fake news. You're finding out that you've been lied to constantly, and they're just parroting what they find out on the television screen. It's still fake news, even if you don't, whether you like it or not. So Americans still have to come to grips. It's not selective fake news. You have to realize that you're being lied to. It's unfortunate, and you have to, on your own, go and search for the truth.
Today we have all these problems, and we've gone a long way from the understanding the founders had. Today, truth in an empire like we have is treasonous. And what I mentioned as I opened the program was the founders thought the worst thing you could do, or at least it deserved the death penalty, was to debase the currency. That's how important they thought it was. So back then, they put the emphasis on this, honesty in money, and not stealing from the people, and not having a monetary system that provides benefits to the banks and all the special interests. No, they don't do that. Now, the people who tell the truth, are considered treasonous. He doesn't support the troops. He doesn't do this. And just think of all that shouting about, during these hearings and things, that we have to impeach the president. And there are some reasons why maybe the president deserves it, sort of maybe with his foreign policy or other thing. But the other side, the Democrats are saying we have to impeach him because we have to fulfill our duty to the Constitution. That really gets my goat, I guess, because it's so ridiculous. It's so deceitful, and it's so counterfeit when it comes. And they say it with a straight face. And the one thing is that people like this that can create policies, economic policies that are doomed to fail, and the poor suffer, and the middle class gets wiped out. And then also there's these philosophies that give us nothing but grief overseas, and thousands and thousands of Americans die and hundreds of thousands of other people die. The people who do this, even when the results are in, and the results, supposedly the results were in about the Iraq War, and yet we're back at that again. The individuals who are really behind this, and you could say that the first 10 years of this century, that perpetuated this foreign policy and so much suffering, they never feel shame. They have a sociopathic attitude. That matter of fact, we had one individual, it's easily identifiable, that would giggle over the fact that, oh, we went in there and we killed them and all this stuff. They have no shame. And it's also fake and fictitious when they're going to take care of the people. And this system of fake money, counterfeit money, and a political system that we have now is designed to take care of the special interests, respond to the demands of some special countries around the world who have a lot of influence on us, and they continue to do that, and then all in the pretense that we have to take care of the middle class and we have to bail them out. And the one thing they won't recognize is, there are some sincere people that have, economic interventionism. They see poor people starving and you have to do it to people living on the streets. But they've never learned a very simple lesson, that if you subsidize something, pump money into something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you'll get more of it. So right now, everybody's racing around. How can we pump more money into building houses for the people that are living on the streets? So we get them out of the way so we don't have to look at them. So that's they do that, and they think they're not going to get more. And we end up with more and more. Just think about it. Hopefully, we will, as a nation, wake up and decide that maybe counterfeit money in a counterfeit society and lying becoming treasonous. Maybe we should reject all that. And I am convinced it's possible because I meet a lot of people and talk to a lot of people that believe this, but we don't have a lot of say in Washington. But I'm also a believer in that ideas have consequences and it makes a difference. So ideas eventually permeate and will influence the government, because the ideas of the founders were one thing, but just look at what's happened in our country past 100 years. So the ideas that have been pumped into us through our universities have had an effect. So, Chris, we need to keep at this and build our numbers, and our numbers are growing. We are getting more people watching our program.
Yeah, it's wonderful, Dr. Paul. I'll finish up by saying, it's up to each of us to, decide whether or not we're going to bathe in these lies that we're constantly told. And for those who are joining our show, you obviously don't like them anymore. So thank you for that. And what we just have to do is discard, the temporary things in life and look for the permanent. All this stuff, this fiat money, it's temporary. Our U.S. government is not the first one to think it up. And, empires, obviously, are temporary. Think of all the empires that have existed. Big governments are temporary. They always run out of other people's money. So are bubbles. We could think back to the people flipping houses and lotteries for Florida houses and all the dot-coms, all temporary stuff. They're not lasting. So you want to look for the permanent. Gold has been money for 6,000 years. It's a good bet to have some gold in your possession. And, if you realize some of the economic laws, not just economic, all the natural laws, these are unchanging. They're not temporary. Truth is permanent. So that's what we try to dig down to. Not to say that we have the final word on anything, but we definitely move in that direction. And thank you very much for joining us each day.
Very, very good, Chris. And I want to finish off as a continuation of part of my opening statement, and that is about the currency. The problems we have today is we no longer have a definition of the unit of account. In the Coinage Act of 1792, the founders were very, very precise to define the precise weight of silver to establish a dollar. And that is what's happened. We have no precise definition, and that means it's fake or counterfeit. But that has happened not only with the monetary system, but the rest of the system. What about our educational system? That's pretty fake take two. You go and get you get a degree, and you get a bill that most of them can't pay. So it's all based on discrepancy and distortion of what the truth is. So defining the unit of account is good, but defining the principle of liberty is also absolutely necessary and existent. The government, if they're going to be involved in money, which should be very limited and should be competitive, but the main purpose is what the founders believe: define and stick to and maintain the definition of the unit of account. And in a broader sense, the government should say, what is the purpose of the government? The purpose of the government is to protect liberty of the individual and teach people that they own their own lives, their own bodies, and they should own what their fruits of their labor. And liberty is negative in the sense that government doesn't give them anything except their liberty. Just get out of the way and the liberty comes to us naturally. That is what we need, is a definition for liberty and a belief in it, with the realization that if you care at all about peace and prosperity, that is the only way to go. Otherwise, you have tinkering around and a maldistribution of wealth, making one group more wealthy than another, which is what we're suffering from today. And yet they're blaming freedom on the discrepancy of people becoming worth, one individual worth $1 trillion. There's something wrong with the system, but there isn't anything wrong with free market economy and sound money. There's something wrong with this counterfeit system that we have been taught to accept. We'd like to encourage people to challenge it and make an effort to help us change it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.